Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles, son of Peleus, that terrible anger which brought countless sorrows upon the Greeks, and sent many brave souls down to the house of the dead. This is how Homer begins, not with glory, not with victory banners or golden thrones. He begins with anger, with one man's fury. And from that single burning emotion, an entire world is set ablaze. Welcome to English Through Great Stories. Today we enter one of the oldest, most powerful stories ever told. A story of war, of gods, of grief, of love, and of what it means to be human in a world that is brutal and beautiful at the same time. This is the Iliad, the rage of Achilles and the war for Troy. Chapter 1. The Rage Begins. It is the 10th year of the war, 10 long, exhausting years since the Greek fleet sailed across the sea to the shores of Troy. All because a Trojan prince named Paris took the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, from her Greek husband Menelaus. Thousands of men have died for this. Thousands more will die before the end. But the story Homer chooses to tell does not begin at the very start of the war. It begins with a quarrel. The Greeks, whom Homer calls the Achaeans, have been raiding the cities around Troy. In one of these raids, they took captive women and divided them among their leaders as prizes. Agamemnon, the great king, the commander of all the Greek forces, took a girl named Chrysis. Her father, Chryses, was a priest of the god Apollo. He came to the Greek camp with gold and gifts, begging humbly for his daughter's return. Agamemnon refused. He sent the old man away with harsh, contemptuous words. And so the priest walked back along the shore of the grey sea alone and prayed to his god. Apollo heard him. The god descended from Olympus like a storm, his silver bow singing. For 9 days his arrows fell upon the Greek camp, arrows of plague. Men died like cattle. The pyres burned without ceasing. It was Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks, the son of the goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus, who called the assembly. A prophet named Calchas revealed the truth. Agamemnon must return Chryses to her father without ransom if the plague was to end. Agamemnon raged. He agreed to give the girl back, but he demanded a replacement, and his eyes fell on Briseis, the prize of Achilles himself. The confrontation between these two men is one of the most electric moments in all of literature. Achilles, young and blazing with pride, called Agamemnon a drunk, a coward, a man who grows fat on the courage of others. Agamemnon, cold and imperious, reminded Achilles who held authority here. He would take Briseis. The decision was final. Achilles' hand flew to his sword, and only the invisible intervention of the goddess Athena stopped him from drawing it. Achilles sheathed his sword, but his decision was devastating. He would withdraw. He would fight no more. Let Agamemnon lead without him. Let the Greeks discover what they had taken for granted, that without Achilles they were diminished, exposed, vulnerable. He went to the shore, alone, and wept. And he called to his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, who rose from the waves to hold him. He asked her to go to Zeus himself and arrange that the Greeks should suffer in his absence. Thetis wept too. She knew something Achilles knew as well, something that hung over every scene of this epic like a shadow. He had been given a choice by fate, a long, quiet life of no particular fame, or a short life, blazing and glorious, ending young on the plain before Troy. He had chosen glory, and now that choice was beginning to close around him like a door. Chapter 2. The War Without Achilles. Thetis carried Achilles' request to Zeus, who nodded his great head, and the plan was set in motion. The Greeks would be driven back. They would feel the weight of what they had lost. Meanwhile, the war continued. Both sides assembled on the plain before the walls of Troy. Thousands of men, the gleam of bronze armor catching the morning sun, the rattle of spears and shields, the nervous breathing of horses. Homer pauses the action here to give us something extraordinary, a catalogue of ships, a roll call of heroes. It is his way of honoring the dead, of saying these were real people. They had homes, they had names. Kings and princes from across the Greek world, Menelaus of Sparta, burning with the injustice done to him. Ajax, huge and immovable as a boulder. Odysseus, sharp-minded, cunning, never the greatest warrior, but always the most resourceful. There is an extraordinary moment early in the fighting. Paris, the beautiful, irresponsible Trojan prince whose desire for Helen ignited this entire catastrophe, steps forward and challenges any Greek to single combat. Menelaus accepts immediately, stepping down from his chariot like a lion who has spotted his prey. Paris, faced suddenly with the reality of what he caused, loses his nerve. He tries to slip back into the Trojan ranks. His brother Hector confronts him with blistering scorn. In all of the Iliad, no relationship is more compelling than these two brothers. Paris, who causes everything, and Hector, who pays for everything. Shamed, Paris agrees to fight. The duel takes place, and Menelaus is clearly winning, but the goddess Aphrodite, protector of Paris, snatches him away in a cloud of mist and carries him back to the safety of Troy. The truce collapses, the war resumes. Without Achilles, the Greek heroes fight bravely. Diomedes, in particular, blazes across the battlefield with divine ferocity. He even wounds two gods, Ares himself, the god of war, and Aphrodite, in scenes that feel almost surreal. Homer wants us to understand, men at their most extraordinary can briefly touch the divine, but they cannot sustain it. Flesh is mortal, and without Achilles, the tide begins to turn. Chapter 3. The Gods Take Sides. The gods of Olympus are never absent from this story. They are woven into every moment, watching, arguing, intervening. On one side, Hera and Athena, bitterly opposed to Troy, still furious at the judgment of Paris, who long ago chose Aphrodite over them in a contest of beauty. On the other side, Aphrodite, protecting Paris. Apollo honoring the Trojans, Ares drawn to the violence on whichever side he favors that day, and above them all, Zeus, massive, deliberate, holding the scales of fate. Zeus does not simply want one side to win. He honors Thetis' request and for a time tilts the balance toward the Trojans, so the Greeks will feel what Achilles means to them. Encouraged by Zeus's favor, the Trojans, led by the magnificent Hector, push the Greeks back to their ships. They light fires on the plain. For the first time in 10 years, the Greeks are truly afraid. Agamemnon, humbled, sends envoys to Achilles, gifts, apologies, the return of Briseis, and much more besides. Achilles refuses. The wound of dishonor runs too deep. He will sail home at dawn. Beside Achilles through all of this sits Patroclus, his closest companion, watching the Greek dead pile up and the fires draw closer to the ships. He says nothing yet, but his grief is building. Soon it will lead him to make a desperate request, one that will open the door to catastrophe. Chapter 4. Hector and Andromache. Before we go further into the darkness ahead, Homer steps back inside the walls of Troy and gives us the most human scene in the entire epic. Hector, the greatest of the Trojan warriors, has returned briefly from the battlefield. He moves through the city, past women and old men who watch him with a mixture of pride and terrible fear. He goes to find his wife Andromache and their infant son Astyanax. He finds them at the great tower of the Scaean Gate, Andromache watching the battle from above, their baby in the arms of a nurse. When she sees Hector, she comes to him quickly. She takes his hand. She tells him what her life has already cost, her father killed in war, her brothers dead, her mother gone. "You, Hector," she says, "you are my father and my mother and my brother. You are everything. Do not make me a widow." Hector looks at her. He knows with the clarity that great men sometimes carry inside them that Troy will fall. He knows that Andromache will one day be taken as a slave. He sees it all and cannot stop it. He tells her he must fight, not because he doesn't know the outcome, but because honor and duty call him. He tells her that he would feel unbearable shame before the men and women of Troy, before all those who have fought and suffered alongside him, if he turned away from battle now. He reaches for his baby son, but the child screams with fright at the great bronze helmet, the nodding horsehair crest. Hector laughs, a sudden bright human laugh, and removes the helmet. He takes the boy and holds him up to the gods, praying, "Let my son be known as a great man among the Trojans, better even than his father." Then he gives the boy back to his wife, and she laughs through her tears. It is a moment so achingly ordinary, a father making his child laugh, placed inside such extraordinary devastation that it almost stops your heart. Homer understands something here that all great writers understand. The most unbearable losses are not the grand ones, they are the small ones. A laugh, a hand held, a prayer for a son who will never grow up to hear it answered. Hector sets his helmet back on his head. He turns and walks back toward the gates and back into the war. Andromache goes home. She and her women begin to mourn him while he is still alive. They know. In their bones they know. Chapter 5. The Death of Patroclus. The Trojans breach the Greek wall. They are at the ships that were the Greeks' only hope of going home, are being set on fire. And Patroclus, Achilles' dearest companion, the gentler soul of the two, can bear it no longer. He comes to Achilles, weeping again, and makes a desperate request. If Achilles will not fight, then let Patroclus go in his place. Let him wear Achilles' armor, so the Trojans will think Achilles has returned, and the Greeks might be saved. Achilles agrees, but he gives strict instructions. Drive them from the ships, and then return. Do not pursue them to the walls of Troy. Do not let glory carry you too far. These words will haunt everything that follows. Achilles helps Patroclus into the divine armor, the armor the gods themselves had given Peleus as a wedding gift. The sight of it causes both men to feel the weight of what is happening. Achilles prays privately for his friend's safe return. The effect is immediate and electrifying. When the Trojans see Achilles' armor blazing in the sun and hear the battle cry, they break. Patroclus fights brilliantly, driving them back from the ships, saving the Greek fleet, killing many Trojan warriors in the fury of his advance. Among the warriors Patroclus strikes down in his great advance is Sarpedon, the beloved son of Zeus himself. Zeus longs to save him. He watches from Olympus, weighing the thought. But even the king of the gods will not break the order of fate. As Patroclus' spear finds Sarpedon, Zeus sends blood-red rain upon the earth, his only mourning, his only tribute. Even divine love has its limits. There is something almost unbearably sad in that image. Zeus weeping tears of blood for his son, but letting him fall. Homer is asking us, if even the gods must lose those they love, what hope do mortals have of escaping grief? And then, exactly as Achilles feared, glory pulls him forward. He presses on towards the walls of Troy itself. 3 times Patroclus charges at the walls of Troy. 3 times Apollo drives him back. On the 4th attempt, the god warns him that Troy is not destined to fall to Patroclus, or even to Achilles. Patroclus retreats, but not far enough. Later, as he attacks the Trojans again, Apollo comes unseen from behind. He strikes Patroclus, knocks the helmet from his head, and shatters his spear. A Trojan warrior wounds him, and then Hector, seizing the moment, drives his own spear through Patroclus's belly. The great warrior falls. The plain shakes with the sound of his armor striking the earth. Hector stands over him. Patroclus, dying, speaks. He tells Hector, "You did not kill me alone. A god and fate were with you." And he speaks a prophecy with his last breath. Hector, too, will die soon. Hector dismisses the words. He strips Achilles' divine armor from the body of Patroclus and puts it on himself, gleaming with a stolen glory. A fierce battle erupts over the body, Greeks and Trojans fighting desperately for custody of the fallen man. The news is carried to Achilles by Antilochus, who weeps as he speaks. Achilles does not respond with words. He collapses to the ground. He tears at his hair with his hands. He pours dust and ashes over his face and his great body. His cry is so terrible that his mother Thetis, deep beneath the sea, hears it and rises again from the waves to find her son prostrate in his grief. Chapter 6. The rage returns. Thetis holds her son and asks what he needs. He has only one answer. Hector must die. He knows what it will cost him. He knows his own death follows close behind Hector's. That is the prophecy, fixed and certain. He does not care. The rage that once burned against Agamemnon has transformed into something older and deeper. This is grief that has become fury. This is love that has no other outlet. Thetis goes to the divine smith Hephaestus and asks him to forge new armor for her son. He agrees and works through the night at his great bellows. What he creates is described by Homer in one of the most celebrated passages in all of ancient literature. A shield of layered bronze, tin and gold, upon which the god engraves the entire world. Cities at peace, cities at war, harvests, weddings, the ocean itself running along the rim. It is a remarkable artistic choice. In the middle of this story of rage and death, Homer holds up a shield that contains the fullness of life, not just war, but dance and laughter and young men courting girls in the evening light, as if to say, this is what is always at stake. This is what war destroys, everything on that shield. Armed with his new divine armor, Achilles reconciles with Agamemnon. The quarrel that began this whole catastrophe is set aside, not truly healed, but buried under the greater weight of grief. The gifts, the wounded honor, and the old quarrel no longer matter to him. He cares only about Patroclus, and about what he will do to the man who killed him. When Achilles appears on the rampart above the Greek camp and shouts his battle cry across the plain, the earth shakes. The Trojans freeze. 3 times he cries out, and 3 times the Trojan army is thrown into chaos. His very voice is a weapon. He has not yet drawn a sword, and already men are dying in the panic. The goddess Athena lights a golden fire around his head like a halo of divine flame. The next day he goes to war, and what follows is not a battle, it is a force of nature. Achilles kills so many Trojans that the great river Scamander, running red with blood, rises in fury against him and tries to drown him in its currents. Even the river cannot stop him. He is something beyond human, beyond rational in these moments. He is grief given a spear and set loose upon the world. Chapter 7. Achilles and Hector. The Trojans flee back inside their walls. Almost everyone makes it. Almost. Hector stands outside the Scaean gate and waits. His old father, Priam, king of Troy, watches from the walls above and begs him to come inside. His mother, Hecuba, weeps and pleads. They can see what is coming across the plain. They can feel the earth trembling. Hector stands. Homer tells us what Hector thinks as he waits. He imagines, briefly, approaching Achilles without armor, offering to return Helen, offering all the treasures of Troy, making peace. And then he dismisses the thought. He knows Achilles would not listen. There can be no gentle conversation between them now. He thinks also of running. He imagines his own shame if he does. He stands still. He waits. And then Achilles rounds the corner of the wall, blazing like a star, and Hector runs. This, too, is part of what makes Homer extraordinary. Hector, the bravest man in Troy, the last wall between his city and destruction, runs. Not because he is a coward, because he is human. Because the sight of Achilles in that moment, burning with grief and divine fury, breaks something in even the bravest man. They run 3 times around the walls of Troy, Achilles behind him like death itself. Zeus holds up his golden scales and weighs the fates of the 2 men. Hector's side sinks. Zeus looks away. Athena descends to the plain and deceives Hector, taking the form of his brother Deiphobus, pretending to fight beside him. Hector stops and turns to face Achilles at last. They exchange their last words. Hector asks that his body be returned to his family when the fight is done. Achilles refuses, cold and absolute. There will be no mercy, no agreement, only the spear. Achilles drives his spear through the gap in Hector's armor at the throat, the very armor he himself had worn, the armor stripped from the body of Patroclus. Hector falls. With his last breath, he repeats the prophecy. Achilles will die before Troy's gate, and Paris and Apollo will be his end. Achilles says he knows. He accepts it. It does not soften him even now. What Achilles does next is the darkest moment in the poem. He ties Hector's body behind his chariot and drives back toward the Greek ships, dragging him through the dust while his family watches helplessly from Troy's walls. In the days that follow, Achilles repeatedly drags the body around the burial mound of Patroclus, his grief finding no other outlet, his rage finding no end. Homer does not excuse this. He shows us Achilles at his most pitiless, and he keeps the camera fixed on him. But the gods, watching, are troubled. Apollo preserves Hector's body from corruption and disfigurement, shielding it with divine grace, while Achilles continues his mourning and his rage. The gods begin to murmur that this cannot continue, that even the dead deserve their dignity. And Zeus finally sends a message. The body must be ransomed. Achilles must let it go. Chapter 8. The Ransom. Old King Priam makes a decision that takes everyone's breath away, including his own family. He will go himself by night to the Greek camp, to Achilles. He will carry gold and treasure and beg with his own aged hands for the body of his son. His family pleads with him not to go. His wife weeps, his advisers fear for his life. He sets out with only his elderly herald Idaeus beside him, until the god Hermes, taking on the guise of a young man, leads them safely through the night and into the Greek camp. Priam enters Achilles' shelter alone. He enters Achilles' shelter and goes to him, and he does something no king should ever do. He kneels. He takes Achilles' hands, the hands that have killed so many of his sons, and he kisses them, and he speaks. He says, "Remember your own father, Achilles. He is old, as I am old. He waits for a son to come home. But I have lost the best of all my sons, and I have come to ask for his body back. I have done what no man before me has done. I have kissed the hand of the man who killed my child." Achilles weeps. For the first time since Patroclus died, he weeps not in rage, but in grief, clean human grief. He thinks of his own father, Peleus, waiting at home. He gently lifts Priam's hands away from his. They weep together, these two men on opposite sides of this terrible war. One for a dead son, one for a dead friend. And in that shared weeping, something shifts, something that has been rigid softens. Achilles speaks to Priam about fate. He tells him of the two great jars that stand at the threshold of Zeus, one filled with blessings, one with sorrows. Most men receive a mixture. Some receive only sorrow. Even the great suffer. Even Peleus, blessed by the gods with a divine wife, has only one son, and that son will die young before Troy. There is no self-pity in the way Achilles says this, only a terrible, clear-eyed acceptance. He agrees to return Hector's body. He has it washed and anointed with oil and wrapped in fine cloth. He lifts it himself and places it gently on the cart. He offers Priam food and wine, and the old man who has not eaten since his son's death accepts. They eat together. They look at each other. Achilles is moved by the old man's dignity. Priam is moved by the young warrior's grief and grace. For one night the war pauses. Achilles grants Priam safe passage and 11 days of truce so that Troy may mourn and bury Hector with full honor. Before dawn, Hermes wakes the old king and leads him and his precious cargo back across the plain, back through the gates of Troy that Hector will never guard again. When the cart enters Troy, the grief of the city is overwhelming. Andromache holds her husband's head in her hands and speaks to him, tells him what his death means for their son, for her, for all of Troy. Hecuba mourns. Helen herself speaks last. She says that in all her years in Troy, Hector alone was always kind to her. He never blamed her, never made her feel the shame that others pressed upon her like a stone. They build the funeral pyre for Hector, breaker of horses. They gather his bones and bury them in a golden urn beneath the earth, covering it with stones. And then they hold a great funeral feast in the house of Priam. This is the final line of the Iliad. Thus they performed the funeral rites for Hector, tamer of horses. The poem ends not with victory, not with the fall of Troy, but with a burial, with grief made dignified. Closing reflection. The Iliad is nearly 3,000 years old. It was composed in an age so distant from ours that its world, bronze armor, warring city-states, gods walking disguised among men, feels almost mythological. And yet, here we are, still reading it, still moved by it, still recognizing ourselves in it. That is not an accident. That is the measure of what Homer achieved. What the Iliad is truly about is not war, though war is everywhere in it. It is about what makes us human, our capacity for rage and our capacity to lay it down, our hunger for glory and the cost that glory extracts from those who love us, our knowledge that we will die, and our choice to live fully anyway. Achilles knew he would die young. He chose it, and Homer asks us, was it worth it? And does not answer. Think of the shield of Achilles, that image of the whole world hammered in gold and bronze, weddings and harvests alongside sieges and slaughter. Homer saw all of it as one thing, inseparable. Joy and grief, peace and war, love and loss. He did not believe in a world where only the beautiful parts exist. He believed in the whole, complicated, aching truth of being alive. And perhaps the most extraordinary moment, the one that no reader ever forgets, is Priam kneeling before Achilles, an old king crossing a dark plain with only an elderly herald beside him, walking into the camp of his enemy to ask for his son's body. It is an act of courage far more profound in its way than anything done on the battlefield. It is the courage not of strength, but of love, of a father who has nothing left to lose except the chance to bring his boy home. And Achilles, in receiving him with grace and grief, in setting aside his rage for one quiet night, returns at last to his full humanity. Not a demigod, not a warrior of legend, a young man who has lost his best friend and understands at last that no amount of killing will bring him back. In his grief and in his mercy, Achilles becomes someone we recognize, someone we might even love. Thank you for listening to English Through Great Stories. If the words of Homer have touched you today, if you found yourself moved, surprised, or quietly changed, then Homer has done what he always does. He reaches across 3,000 years of silence and reminds us we were always like this. And perhaps we were always capable of this, of weeping together across every boundary over what we have lost. Thus they performed the funeral rites for Hector, tamer of horses. And the world went on, as it always does, carrying its grief, carrying its beauty, both at once.